Hello everybody and welcome back. So, this part of this video series is going to be all about plants and winterizing your pond and what to do with your plants. Now, when you're keeping plants, if you have tropical plants, it's going to be much harder than keeping fish. Much harder because these are tropicals and there's say about, 70% chance everything you bring inside might survive. I've had large plants, tropical plants die on me before throughout the winter and there's just nothing you can do about it. Either you get really lucky or you don't. Now, if you have a setup like mine, like I have this tub right here, and I have my fish in here. The fish, I want to keep that cold temperature, like I talked about in the first part of the series. Plants, they like the warm temperature. So in theory, with this tank here, I don't have a heater in here now, but I could add a heater. And that heater would keep the water plenty warm, which would increase my plant's survival rate chance by a lot. Which is something I might consider doing because that's not a bad idea, because if I keep it warm, my tropical plants will do much better. Which is also something to consider if you have like tropical lily pads. You want to try and keep those alive during the winter. I've never kept them. I've heard it's really, really hard to keep them alive during the winter. But that's something to keep in mind. So you can heat the water, get these lights like this, and then you'll basically be fine. Now, we'll go out and look at the pond. I'll kind of show you what do I bring in, because if you do what I do, you get a bunch of plants, and bringing them inside takes up a bunch of room. These plants, the water lettuce, water hyacinths, will not survive the winter. Outside, for sure, they won't. If you bring them indoors, you have a chance. I've never had mine survive inside. Now, they're pretty cheap, they're pretty easy to get, maybe $10 for one of each of these, and then they grow into all of this. Like all of this year started basically from one of each, and I've absolutely tons. And I've even thrown some of this out. This isn't all I've had all year. I've had even more. So they grow pretty quickly if you give them full sun. So it's pretty easy to get these back in about a year. Next spring, I get two, and then I'm done. I don't have to worry about it. So one thing that can be a problem if you're bringing this stuff inside is because the pond has natural shelves like this. As a natural shelf, you have a rock, and it's not super deep along the sides, and all of that just it helps make sure I get the plants at the right depth. Bringing them inside, I no longer have that ability, and I have to get a bit more creative about how I stack them, because I have to make sure that I don't drown my plants. Now, we'll go back inside and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So, with this tank, it's really hard. Most of these pond plants, they don't want to be at the bottom of this. Like, that's too deep. Way too deep. They'll drown if you put them that deep. This one here I've suspended up at the top, and it's working so far. It's only fallen in like once, and I've added that wood support, which I think will help a bunch. But these pots are usually pretty sturdy. Now, the roots help filter the water, and the fish provide the nutrients, which helps the plants grow and keeps them alive, which does help a lot. But trying to keep them at high enough in a tank like this, like if I were to bring all of these plants and try and fit them in a tank this size, I don't think it's possible. Like, they're too big. It would be really, really hard. It'd take up too much space. So that's another thing to consider when you're buying, the tank or the stock tank, whatever it is you're keeping your stuff inside during the winter with, is how on earth are you going to stack them. Now, in this here, I've used some pretty creative ways of just keep making sure they're high enough. Now, because my fish aren't in here, I can increase this water depth to whatever I want it to be. Now, I fill it up reasonably high because there are a couple goldfish in here somewhere. They're itty bitty tiny. I was trying to see how they do in this stock tank. So they're probably hiding goodness knows where. But I basically use like bricks, cinder blocks, anything like that I can stack things on, make sure it's sturdy, good. Like these here. So these pots, there's two pots here. Oh my gosh, the slide's right in the way. There we go. There's two pots here, and these are stacked up on bricks that go down to the bottom of the stock tank. And this is just sitting on top. And I arrange them according to what depth they need to be at. This one I know will be fine with just the base being in the water. As you can see, so somewhere it's got these roots. The roots are going down into the water. So that helps a lot with that. That helps keep him alive. And other ones like this taro plant right here, this I just dropped rocks back here until it stayed. And I won't put any big fish back there, so I'm not too worried about them falling out and potentially spilling. So, and then plants like this, this is just sitting at the bottom, but I just make sure the water level doesn't get too high, just so it, it sticks out the top enough so it does fine. Now, this one down here I have on some rocks, and the lily pad just sits at the bottom. It doesn't need to be lifted up at all. Another way of doing it, and this way I just made simply because I had literally no room in any of these tanks to try and put this plant in, is I just took a 5-gallon bucket, basically filled it with water. There's water down there. I probably need to add a bit more. Then I set the pot on top, and it just fits around the side. So that way it stays wet, it's out of the water, and it'll just hibernate, and hopefully it'll be fine. You see, it's got a couple new stems and stuff. We'll see. So the plants are pretty straightforward. It's a bit more complicated than fish because I keep lights. Like this is my old reef tank light. You don't have to have anything this fancy, but it's one of me use this year. And same thing for this. That guy right here, I'm pretty sure is an old aquarium light. Or I take that back. I know it's an old aquarium light. I'm pretty sure it's an old reef tank light, like old saltwater tank light. You can find those cheap, like at a garage sale on Craigslist. Those are really good for keeping plants because they're pretty bright. The other cheaper option, if you have no other way of doing it, is a clip-on light with a grow bulb. This is like anything you can buy at Home Depot or Lowe's. $5, $10 maybe total, depending on where you live. It may cost different. Now this, you just clip onto the side. This is what I used last year on this tub, and everything did fine. I didn't have any of these fancy lights last year. I just had this clip-on light. That on that stock tank was able to keep the plants alive. You can try keeping them in basically just room lights. I like that one because I felt more comfortable knowing that my plants are going to have a better chance. Because these pond plants are expensive. When you're talking about spending potentially like, $10, $20 for a pond plant, blah. Spending extra $10 to make sure you keep, your potentially your $50, $60 worth of plants alive is totally worth it, because having all these suckers die because you didn't have a $10 light on them is kind of, frustrating. And they won't always survive. Last year I had a big plant not survive, and I think it's just because I put them in too late. Like it frosted once, and I think it died from that. So timing's very, very important when you bring these plants inside, because if it frosts once, they could die from it. So consider that. That's a very important thing to consider. That's basically all there's to it. Keeping the lights. I recommend water flow. It helps with the filtration, helps give them some nutrients, especially if you have fish in there. Having them blow into the plant pots helps filter the water, keeps it cleaner. Get the light, because it's worth doing. It may not do anything, your plants may not grow, but it gives them that light. And it does give them a bit of warmth, which, will help because these are mostly tropical plants. That's basically all there is to it. There's not a whole lot you can really do. Sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you don't. You kind of have to experiment around, see which plants do survive. And it's worth trying. Don't just leave them outside and say, oh, I'll just get them again next year, because, this guy this is his second year. I mean, this sucker's huge. Like, he's like basically in a pot like this when I first got him. He sticks in the middle. He wasn't very big, and he's growing all around that pot. So saving that growth is totally worth it, because that's a crazy amount of growth. So I get these huge pond plants, and I keep them alive, save a bunch of money, save my big giant plants, and it looks really cool the next year when you have a plant that's 3 times as big compared to when you first got it. Eventually, I like to make a video showing how I pot my plants, so you kind of get an idea about why and what I do. Because what I do with my pots really does work. I'm not just gonna, not trying to sound arrogant or anything, but it works. I've had a lot of success with it, and I really want you guys to see how I do it. So that's basically all there's to it, to keeping basically your fish and your plants inside. If you keep your plants alive, your fish are going to be fine. The goldfish are much easier to keep than the plants are. So you don't have to be too worried about that. This probably isn't the safest idea, but it does work. So stacking the plants in something like this is much easier than this. And having 2 separate containers is kind of nice. so I could have all my fish have a bunch of swim room, and my plants are all, you know, nestled in their thing, and I can control that water chemistry separate from this. So if I need to heat this water, I can without having to worry about my fish. So that's basically all there is to it. Thank you guys for watching. Leave a comment with a future video idea, like the video, subscribe to my channel, and check out my blog site. Link to that will be in the description of this video. And just have an awesome day, guys. Bye.